because I have now got 17 hours, 55 minutes and 56 seconds left on the clock. 6 hours, 9 minutes and 16 seconds left to go. 31 minutes and 57 seconds left. Hi everyone and welcome to my 24-hour readathon. So the way I've decided I've wanted to film this for you all is I've decided to do the timer method. So on my iPad I've set a timer for 24 hours, which over the next couple days I'm planning on smashing my way through. Like hopefully over the next 3 days I can get this completed for you all. So I've decided to do this because I knew if I tried to stay up for a full 24 hours, that just would not work. I'd collapse. My sleep is way too important to me. I would struggle to get through all of these books. So I'm just really trying to test myself to see how much I'm actually able to read in a 24-hour period. So every single time when I'm not reading, I'm going to pause the timer. So basically I'm able to know how many pages I'm able to read every hour. And I actually don't think I'll start this challenge until tomorrow, once I've managed to edit a couple videos, because I had a filming day today, so I just want to get them out of the way so then I don't have to think about them. But now I just want to jump straight into the TBR for you all. So the first book I'm planning on reading is part of my December TBR, but it's actually not a part of my TBR game, which is One Piece Pick a Book. But the book I've chosen to start this challenge off with is Bonded by Thorns by Elizabeth Helen. This book has just been on my radar for a while now. I just really am interested in picking it up. I want to see what all of the hype is about. And all I know about this book is that it is a reverse harem Beauty and the Beast retelling. And I'm really hoping that the reverse harem elements of this novel gives the Beauty and the Beast retelling a new spin to it. Because this is a storyline which I've read so many retellings of, so it's kind of like I feel like I'm a bit oversaturated with it, even though it's one of my favorite stories ever. So I'm really hoping that this book is unique, gives me something different, but I am also going into this book not really expecting a masterpiece, because I think from what I've heard that this series just gets better and better as the books progress and we get more depth in the storyline, whereas because this book is so short but the rest of the books in this series are chunky, like they look huge. So yeah, this is the first book I'm planning on reading, and I've actually chosen 2 other books that I will be reading because I know I will smash this book out. Like there's no question about it. This is not going to take me 24 hours. It'll probably just take me like a couple, maybe 3 or 4, more like 4. I feel like that's my estimate. So the next book I'm planning on reading is End of Days by Susan E. And this is a book I could not be more excited to read because this is the finale to the Angel Fall series, which is a series that has completely shocked me because I read the first book and started it like a year or 2 ago, got 60 pages in and put it down, which I'm kind of grateful for, but then I also feel like it was a big regret just because of how much I liked it. But then I feel like if I had have read Angel Fall back then, I might not have enjoyed it as much as I did, because this series got a whole lot darker than I was expecting. I really enjoyed the romance so far, so I just cannot wait to wrap this book up and see what's going to happen next to these characters. And this is actually a book which will help me fulfill one of my TBR challenges of my TBR game, and that was a character card, and this is called Sengoku. And for this I had to read a book with gold on the cover, so this will obviously fulfill that prompt because it's got gold wings, so there's like no question about that. That just, it fulfills the prompt. It's as simple as that. So I'm really excited for this book to be on this list. And now the third and final book, which I know I'll definitely be reading, and I just wanted to introduce you guys all to, was The Striker by Anna Huang. I know I need to read this because I just need to find out why a sports romance needs to be like 600 pages long. Like I don't get it. I think that's how long this book is. No, sorry, it's 578 or it's 577, somewhere around there. It is ridiculously long, and Anna Huang I've read from before, and most of her characters get together quite soon in her books, so I'm very worried going into this book, especially because of how long it is. And from what I've read, Anna Huang is not a slow burn romance queen. However, I do love some of her books. Like the 4th and final book in the Twisted series was one of my favorites ever. Like I love it, so I am so excited to pick this book up. It's definitely the book off this list so far which I'm the least excited for. but it's the longest. So like, I'm going to read it. I can't wait. It's just, I need to find out like why does it have to be this big? So yeah, these are the 3 books which I'm planning on reading, and this will probably start tomorrow, and I could not be more excited to get these books off my TBR and see if I love them. So I'll speak to you once I've started reading one. Okay, so it's now time for the first update of this reading vlog, because I have now got 17 hours, 55 minutes and 56 seconds left on the clock, and I have started making my way through Bonded by Thorns by Elizabeth Helen. And this book is taking me so long to get through because I'm also annotating it as I read, but I always knew that was going to be the case. And as I said in the intro, this is a Beauty and the Beast reverse harem retelling, which you can definitely see the Beauty and the Beast inspired elements in this novel. Like, sometimes you read retellings of that story and they've just taken inspiration. You can kind of see the relevance of the Beauty and the Beast retelling, whereas this seems very similar to the source material, which isn't a bad thing because it's a retelling. And I am enjoying this book, but I'm not loving it as much as I wanted to. Like, at the start, I was having so much more fun with this, like way more. I found I was more invested in the characters. They just really had a special place in my heart. But then as the book's gone on, I don't know what it is, but it's like a switch has been flipped in me and I just don't care as much anymore, which is a bit upsetting because I really wanted to like this book, because I really did enjoy Rosalina as a main character, because we're following Rosalina, whose dad was kidnapped by Fae, 4 Fae princes, which leaves her with no choice but to take his place. And there has been this curse that's been put on these 4 princes, which she is then tasked with the job of trying to break. And that's really all I'm going to tell you guys about the story, because I think that's all there is really to know, and that's like literally all there is to the story so far, because it's very much just a Beauty and the Beast inspired story, which I've already said multiple times. So as I was saying, I am enjoying it, but I don't know, I feel like there's just something missing for me to be absolutely obsessed with it. Maybe it's because as the story goes on, I'm finding Rosalina to be more of an annoying character, because at the start she was really endearing and I was obsessed with the things she was saying. I found her to be really strong, and she's still strong, but she's just not my favourite. Like, I don't know what it is that's made this book go downhill for me, which is very disappointing, because I just wanted to love it so much. And I'm like, maybe it's a me problem. Like, maybe I'm just not in the mood to read and that's what's impacting my mood, but I don't really know. So I don't have much else to say about this, because there's not really much I can say about it, because I feel like not a lot has happened in these 230 pages. Like, it's very much just an introductory novel of getting to know the characters, seeing how their relationships are forming, learning about the relationships that were already there. Because I do enjoy the 4 Fae princes, but they're not my favourite. I'm like not obsessed with any of them really. So it's just a meh read so far. Like, it is a good time. I'm not having a bad time when I'm reading it, but it's not one of them books where I'm desperate to pick it up. Like, it's one of them books that I'm enjoying when I'm reading it, but when I put it down, I don't need to pick it up again, which is frustrating when you're trying to do a 24-hour readathon. So I'm going to leave talking about this book here, because I don't feel like it's necessary for me to go any further, because, like, as I said, I've got nothing else to say. And so far during this readathon, I have also already managed to finish a book, which was End of Days by Susan E. So I didn't mean to finish this book without even updating you, but I decided to read it and then I just could not stop. I finished it so quickly. Like, I didn't even have time to I did have time. I just couldn't be bothered because I just wanted to read this book so much. I was having such a good time with it. But I didn't love this book as much as the first book, because this is the 3rd book in the Angel Fall series, and Angel Fall is a 5 out of 5 stars. But the main thing I really liked about Angel Fall was getting to know the characters, because in the first book we're following a character called Penryn, whose sister was kidnapped by angels, and then she is forced to work with Raph, who is one of the angels, who was also there when her sister was kidnapped. And something happens to him, he's injured, so then she has to heal him, and then them two work together. And then you just really follow the story from there as they try to rescue Penryn's sister. And I've kind of forgotten what Raph was really doing in that first book, but I just remember loving the chemistry between these two main characters. And I feel like as the series progressed, we got less and less of it. So the thing that I really liked about the first book was missing that special spark between these two characters. Like, we still had interactions between them. There was just something that I didn't love as much, which I can't say because it's spoilers, and it was just a bit sad. Like, I wanted to give this book 5 out of 5 stars. This was a 5 out of 5 star prediction. I thought this was going to be an all-time new favourite series. But I think it's just going to be the first book is an all-time new favourite book, but the rest of the series isn't. Like, I did enjoy this. They're not bad books, but I also think I read them at the wrong time in my life. Because I also feel like if I had read these books maybe when I was like 14 to 16, it would have been a 5 out of 5 stars. I just kind of think I've grown out of the age range, which I'm finding is happening more and more to me, because it's like, I liked how everything wrapped up, but it was very much a neat bow, and it just was like a very YA feeling book on the younger end of YA. So it was a good book, good series. I do recommend them. They're just not an all-time new favourite series like I expected. So now my plans are going to be, I'm going to finish Bonded by Thorns by Elizabeth Helen tonight. But before I do that, I really would like to edit this video so fast, and then I might not update you guys as soon as I've finished Bonded by Thorns. What I might end up doing is updating you when I start the Striker. Like, I think I'm going to finish this book, start the Striker, edit this vlog, and then I will update you guys tomorrow once I've made some progress into these two books. So I'll speak to you then. Okay, so I've officially finished Bonded by Thorns by Elizabeth Helen. I finished reading this book last night, and overall I think I'm going to rate this book a 3 out of 5 stars because it was an enjoyable read, but I still had issues with it because I thought this was going to be a 5-star read. Like, I was honestly predicting that this was going to become a new favourite, but I felt like I was severely disappointed. I just think I went into this book with too many expectations. And I feel like if I had no expectations going into this book, I would have enjoyed it a whole lot more. And I thought after finishing this book, I would have been so desperate to continue on with the series. But I found that with this one, I don't need to pick up the sequel desperately, which is also why I got a 3 out of 5 stars. Because, like, the fact that I'm not dying to pick up the sequel means something. Because normally if I really love a series, all I want to do is binge read it. Whereas this is like, I'm happy to leave gaps in between each book. And I think that could also be because of the fact that it's going to be a 7-book series and we're only up to book 4. And I really like to read my book series close together. And I'm the type of reader, this is really bad, but I will spoil myself of certain plot elements of novels. It's really bad. I'm the type of person who will read the end of the book because I hate the suspense and the anxiety. Not knowing what's going to happen puts me under, so I'd rather just be spoiled with certain elements, which is really bad because I wish I could read a book and be so shocked. And with this, there's just certain things that I need to know, and if I have to wait forever for that to happen, I just can't be bothered, which is so frustrating because I want to binge this series, which just contradicted everything I said about me not wanting to binge it. But I think what I mean is I want this to be a series that I could potentially read really close together and not have to wait for the last 3 books to come out. Just because it was a good time, there's things I want to know, but the fact that I know I now have to wait for books makes me also want to push off the later books. So then that way I don't have to reread this series in the future, because I feel like this isn't necessarily a series I'm going to want to reread. And I feel like one of my major complaints about this novel was Rosalina as a character. At certain points, I absolutely adored her and I found her to be a fantastic character. But then other times I feel like I just could not care less about her. Like, I don't know what it was about her. She was very hit or miss with me with her scenes. Like, sometimes I loved her, sometimes I hated her. And I also found that I wasn't really obsessed with any of the men who she was potentially going to date and they were going to be her mates. Like, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this, which is why I got a 3-star, because I did still have a good time reading it. I annotated it, and I like never annotate books, so that's another bonus. It's just, it was a 3-star read. It was good, not a new favorite, which is upsetting, but it's fine. And I've also realized I might not have given you guys a rating for End of Days by Susan E, my last update, so I just want you to know I also rated this book a 3 out of 5 stars, which is very disappointing because I thought this would be more of like a 4-star or 5-star. And now, so I have also started another book, which is The Striker by Anna Huang. At the moment, I am 270 pages in, but before I do that, I feel like now is a good time to give you all an update of where I am with my timer, which I've still got 14 hours left, 19 minutes and 47 seconds left on the clock, so I've still got a substantial amount of time to get through more books. But my plan is to get through the rest of The Striker tonight. Like, I really feel like this is possible because for the last 2 hours I've just sat down and binge read the first 270 pages. And in this novel, it's a dual perspective story where we're following a character perspective called Asher, and he is a very famous football player, but he has a very well-known rivalry with someone called Vincent, and then them two are forced to get training by Scarlett in ballet. And Scarlett is the other perspective that we're following in this novel, and Scarlett is both Vincent's sister and then Ash's love interest. So we've got the drama around that dynamic there, with Scarlett being Vincent's sister but Ash's future girlfriend. So that means that they have to hide their relationship because Asher and Vincent are enemies. So it's like you've got that drama there. And that's all I really want to say about this book. I did a very bad job of explaining this book, but it's all I can be bothered doing. So I am really enjoying this book. Well, maybe not really enjoying it. I am having a good time reading it. But I feel like I don't love this book the most from what I've read from Anne Huang before. It's definitely feeling so far like a 3 to a 4-star read. It's good, but I don't really care. Like, I do care, but I don't care. I don't care about the relationship, but it is so bingeable, so I'm not disliking anything I'm reading. I'm just feeling very detached from the story. It's like I'm reading it, I don't know how to explain it. It's like I'm reading it from a distance where I'm seeing everything that's happening, but I'm not really caring. I'm not feeling very emotional. I'm not feeling happy. I'm not feeling sad. I'm just feeling very detached as I'm reading this story, which is not really what you want when you're reading a romance, because you want to be swooning over the romance. And here I'm just like, cool, if they get together, that's good for them. If they don't get together, I don't care. And I do like the two characters. Like, they're not bad characters at all. I just feel like they're not new favorites of mine. And I am very excited because we have also seen like sprinkles of characters from Anna Huang's other series, which I was not expecting, which was very exciting because I feel like I'm going to love them too as a couple, but I haven't read their book yet, so I don't know. So that's always fun. And then I just feel like I don't have much to say because, as I said, I'm feeling just very detached as I'm reading it, but it's not a bad book because I don't feel the need to DNF it, and I do want to find out what's happening next. It's just not going to be an all-time new favourite. So I think I'm going to stop talking here, and I'll give you all an update once I've finished The Striker, most likely, because I've still got like 200 pages left to go. So that is my plan for the rest of the day, and then I will speak to you then. Okay, so I've officially finished The Striker by Anna Huang, and overall I think I'm going to rate this a 2 out of 5 stars, but I'll go more into my reasons why tomorrow because I just can't be bothered to do that today. So I've now got 11 hours 56 minutes exactly on the clock left to go, so that's very exciting because it means I'm halfway done with this challenge. And now my plans are for the rest of the night is to start Road of Bones by Demi Winters, which is the next book that I want to read for this 24-hour readathon. And this also fulfills a prompt for my TBR game. Let me grab it out. And this was a character card, and that is Bonnie, and that was to read a book with food or drink on the cover. So once I've read that book, it will obviously fulfill that prompt because there's mushrooms on the cover. So that's my plans for the rest of the night, and I'll just speak to you tomorrow when I give you a final update on the striker, when I can be bothered. So I'll see you then. Okay, it is now time for me to give you my final update of The Striker by Anna Huang, which overall I'm rating a 2 out of 5 stars. I was severely disappointed by this book. I went into it with so many expectations that I was going to love it, because I have loved a few of Anna Huang's books before, and especially Twisted Lies. That's a 5 out of 5 star read for me. It was fantastic. However, I should have expected that there was the potential for me not to love this book, because Anna Huang has actually been, now that I think about it, a very hit or miss author for me. Like, some of her books I really love, and others I just think are average reads. Whereas this is probably the worst book I've read from her. I found that it was too long. Like, the book did not need to be a nearly 600-page romance. Like, it was ridiculous. Everything felt so slow moving, but also fast paced. I didn't like how long it took the characters to get together, because it felt very quick. Even though it wasn't too quick, I think because I didn't care about the couple, like, once they got together, there was nothing really to keep me attached to the story. But I just wanted to finish it, because I'm definitely planning on continuing on with this series, because I'm especially excited for the next book in this series, because we're following Vincent and Brooklyn, and I feel like I'm really going to enjoy their story. But I just found that this book was average. Like, I did not care for the romance. Like, if Asher and Scarlett hadn't have ended up together, I could not have cared less. Like, I just couldn't. For example, there was the third act breakup, which is in basically every single romance novel, and I was like, I don't care. The way their relationship developed, I didn't believe in the chemistry between them two. I didn't really see why they were so attracted to one another, and it's like, what drew them in? So I just wasn't really enthralled with the relationship, so I just didn't really believe this romance. And in a romance, you really need to believe in the relationship, because that is the whole purpose of a romance novel. So when I'm not attached to these characters, and if they end up together, it's very much a slog to get through. And the thing I like about this book is we got little Easter eggs of characters from her other works, especially the Princes of Sin series. Like, I recognised a few character names. I actually haven't read their stories yet, but I do know them because I've read the synopsises of her other works, and then I've seen them in other people's stories. So that has made me really excited to dive back into the Princes of Sin series and get up to date before Prince of Envy, because these are definitely, you can read them separately, but for like the most enjoyment, I would recommend reading Anna Huang's books in order when it comes to the Princes of Sin series and this one, because you got to see characters from the Princes of Sin series show up in here, and you just, if you don't know about them characters, I feel like you're not going to really love it as much, because you'll be like, who are these people? But she does a really good job of, if you haven't read her other books, like, she explains who they are and the role they play. That's the thing I really like about romance novels, is when they're interconnected series, because you get to see characters that you know and love show up in a new way, which is always so much fun. So that's one element I really liked. It was a fast-paced read. It's just, I didn't care for the romance, which is why it got a 2 out of 5 stars. And when I rate a book a 2 out of 5 stars, that does not mean it's a bad book. It just means it's like a really average read, because this isn't a bad book. It's just I didn't care for the romance, and it's a romance novel, so you should care for the romance, hence why it got a 2 out of 5 stars. Like, it was just a very average read. So they were my final thoughts on The Striker. So now my plans for the rest of the day are, first I want to have a shower, edit this clip, then do some washing, and then for the rest of the day I'll just be sitting down and reading as much of Road of Bones as I possibly can by Demi Winters, because I still have not started this book. I know I said in my last clip I would start it last night. I didn't end up doing that, and this 24-hour readathon is taking me way too long, like way longer than I wanted it to. So I just need to really focus on reading and stop getting distracted. So yeah, they're my plans. I'm going to stop babbling and I will let you know my thoughts on Road of Bones once I've made some progress into it. I have officially had a win in this video because I have managed to find a 5 out of 5 star read with The Road of Bones by Demi Winters. This book was absolutely and utterly incredible. But before I go into my thoughts about this book, I wanted to talk you through how much longer I've got left on the timer. And that is 6 hours, 9 minutes and 16 seconds left to go. So I'd really like to get that number down substantially today. Like hopefully I can get it down to maybe an hour if I read for 5. Like that feels doable. But before I go into maybe what books I want to read next, I want to talk you through my thoughts on The Road of Bones. Let me grab it. Right here it is by Demi Winters. As I said, this book was incredible. I loved so much about it, and in this novel we're following a character called Scylla, who her and her father have always been on the run, so they won't stay in a location for over 3 months because they're, as I said, on the run. And then one day when they're traveling to go to Copa, which is a location where they're meant to be safe, her father is murdered, and this means she has to travel along the Road of Bones, which is notoriously dangerous. So after a small stint of the journey by herself, she ends up sneaking into a wagon of the Blood Axe crew, which is a very notorious and dangerous crew. So she manages to weave her way to get them to help her, and then the story really goes from there. That's all I want to say about this book, because when I went into this book, all I knew about it was that it is a Viking-inspired fantasy, and that immediately piqued my interest because I haven't read many Viking inspired fantasies before, and for some reason this book was just calling out my name. I don't know what it was, and I went into this book expecting it to be a 5 stars. I don't know what it was that called out to me. Maybe it was the book cover, the title, that it was a Viking inspired fantasy, and so it was a 5-star prediction. But for the first 100 pages of reading this book, I was regretting my decision. I did not want to read it at all. I found it was so slow to start. I was so bored. I found all the different names a bit hard to get my head round. I didn't really understand what was going on. But as soon as Scylla meets the Blood Axe crew, oh my god, this book just improved tenfold. I was obsessed. And before the 100-page mark, I was so close to updating you all and being like, nope, I can't read this book. It is so slow. I need to break it up by reading it alongside another book. But as soon as Scylla met the Blood Axe crew, I was obsessed. It was so fantastic. The chemistry between Scylla and the rest of the crew has been one of my favorite things. I found Scylla to be such a brilliant character. She was strong. She stood up for herself. She didn't let anyone walk over her. She was very optimistic, which I liked. She was just such a fantastic protagonist, and she's someone who I just felt so obsessed with. I loved her so much. And there's this character called Ray, who I also loved Scylla and Ray's interactions, because them two do not get along at all, and it's just the chemistry between them two was so amazing. Like, I love them two so much. And I think I'm predicting that they're going to be the romantic couple of this series, but I'm not really sure. I just love them so much. I loved Jonas's character and how his storyline progressed. I loved Scylla's relationship with someone called Helva. I don't know, it could be Helka, something like that. Don't really know how to pronounce it. It was just every single member of this crew was so amazing. I love them so much. And it was a very slow-paced, repetitive novel, but that did not skew my enjoyment of this book at all, just because of how obsessed I was with the characters. If you don't like the characters of this book, I feel like you're not going to enjoy it, because for most of the book, it was literally just this cast of characters traveling along this road to go to a new location. Like, that's literally all that happened, or they'd be in fights, or they'd be on the run. So even though it was slow, because I loved the characters so much, I just didn't care that it was so slow moving, except for obviously the first 100 pages when I almost DNF'd it. And if I had have done that, that would have been one of my biggest regrets, because this book was so brilliant. I love it. I want the sequel so badly. But I have to wait till May because the second book isn't out in Australia at the moment, because I think originally this book was indie published and then it got traditionally published, so they're like releasing them. So certain countries have access to different things that others don't. And Australia currently does not have access to the ebook or the physical book of the second one, which was so heartbreaking. But this book, spectacular. I literally loved it. And even though I had complaints with it, the amount that I love this book has given it a 5 stars. Because often when I find a 5-star read, it's normally a book where I can see issues with it, but I try to justify them, or I just don't care. And this is one of them cases where I can see the issues with it, but I just don't care because of how much I love the characters. And the reveal at the end was so shocking, but I couldn't. I need the second book so much because I need to find out what's happening to these characters. And one thing I didn't expect as I was reading this book was it's a multi-perspective novel. So Scylla's the main perspective that we follow in this book, but there are other perspectives that we get to hear from. And sometimes that might be the villains of the story, but then villains for these characters aren't really the right word, because everyone's just trying to survive. Everyone's just trying to do their best. And some people, because obviously the main perspective is Scylla, might take a more darker path, and it doesn't necessarily mean that what they're doing makes them be the villain of the story. It's just they're very much a product of this society. So I just loved it. I loved it so much. I just can't stop saying how much I loved it. It's a 5-star read, one of the best books I've read this whole year. And I'm so thankful I binge read it because it was brilliantly done. And this is, let me tell you how many pages. It's over a 500-page book, and I loved nearly every moment of it except for the start. But I love it. I love it so much. So yeah, I'm going to stop talking about this book because otherwise I'll just repeat myself by saying how much I love it. So now my plans, as I might have already said, is I want to get my timer down. I really would like to only have an hour left on the clock today, or just read as much as I possibly can. But I don't know what book I want to read. So I'm tossing up between a few books. So I've got Airy by, I don't know who the author is, but I have a picture up. And that's the book I need to read for my December TBR for one of the prompts I landed on, which was a pink skull. And then that book was randomly selected for me. I've also then got Terms and Conditions by Lauren Asher, which is the second book in the Dreamland Billionaires series, which I really want to read, but this doesn't really count towards my December TBR. So part of me feels like I should be waiting on this book, even though I really do want to read it. And then the third book I want to read is The Hurricane Wars by Fia Gunzon. I don't know how to say her name. And this is a book from my December TBR where One Piece Pick a Book chose it for me. And the prompt that chose it was a challenge card. And that is to read a book that starts with the same letter as your last read began with. And at the time of filming it, I can't remember what the book was, but it started with T, so I just chose The Hurricane Wars. So this is another book I'm debating on reading, but this is a start of a new series. But I want to read this before the Fairy Loot edition of the sequel comes out, because I've also got the special edition of this book. So I'm really not certain of what book I want to read, but obviously I'll let you guys know in my next update what book I've read and probably finished by the time I speak to you. I finished reading Airy by S.E. Wendell, and on the timer I have got 31 minutes and 57 seconds left to go. So I've decided I'm going to end this video here for you all, because there's no point me going on any longer, because I'm not going to be able to finish another book in half an hour. So I just can't be bothered starting one and then not wrapping it up in this video for you all. So that's the reason why I'm cutting this 24-hour timer challenge short. And I feel like having an extra half an hour that I should have been reading for is close enough to me having read for the full 24 hours, so I'm just going to count it. So before I go into my thoughts about the rest of the books I've read for this video, I want to go into my thoughts on Airy by S.E. Wendell, because I don't actually think I've updated you any point where I've been reading this book. Like at the halfway mark, I don't think I spoke to you guys. So Overall, I think I'm going to give this book a 4 stars. It feels like I'm more of a 3.5, but I will go into my reasons why in a second. So in this book, we're following a character called Lena who is sent away by the king to become this warden of this prison, because there is someone in there called Belle who is an avian, I think that's what they're called. And he has been trapped in this prison for the last 10 years, and there's been different wardens. So it is Lena's task now to become the new warden. But then as these two characters get to know each other, they realise that they're not as bad as they originally thought they were. And you're just really following them as they get to learn more about each other, because they come from 2 different races which don't get along at all. They're at war. And Lena is a knight, so she's been sent away, and then Belle's a bit hesitant of her. Well, not a bit, he's very hesitant of her, because so many of the previous wardens have treated him so badly, because part of the task of being a warden is to break Belle's wings, so he's not able to fly away and escape this prison. So with Belle being the prisoner, it is Lena's job to make sure Belle doesn't escape. And as I said, because of the tensions between these 2 races, these 2 characters do not get along at the start, but then as the story progresses, they learn more and they realize they're not as bad as they originally thought they were. So yeah, as I said, overall, I'm rating this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I feel like it could be more of a 3.5 just because of how long it took me to get through this book. I have been reading this book for days, and this has made this 24-hour readathon go on forever, because I just felt like every time I put this book down, I didn't really want to pick it up. But then when I was reading it, I had such a good time because they were such good characters. I liked the romance and how that developed, because it was a very slow-paced story. And if you're not into romance novels, there's no way you would like this book, because it is so romance heavy. And I feel like nothing really happened in this book, because the majority of this time was just getting to know these characters at this prison. That's all there really was. There was side characters and we got to know them as well. But this was a very character-focused story. So if you also want more of a plot-based story, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this series just because of how character-focused it was. And obviously, with it being a character-focused book, if you don't like these 2 characters, you're not going to enjoy this story. And I felt like it was very slow-moving, but that was fine. But I felt like it made it difficult for a 24-hour readathon, because when you're trying to read a book within a time frame, you want it to be really engaging and fast-paced. Well, I do. So I'm speaking for myself here, obviously, and that is what I'm looking for when I do a 24-hour readathon. I want a very snappy, quick read that's, even if it's long, it's a fast read. For example, Road of Bones, that was a really fast-paced read once I got past the 100-page mark. But this book was just slow throughout the whole story. And even though I liked Lena and Belle, I wasn't obsessed with these 2 characters. I liked them as people. I liked their character arcs and the journeys they went on in this novel. They just weren't a new standout favourite couple of mine or a favourite character of mine. So overall, this was a good book. I do recommend it. It's just not going to become a new favourite for the reasons I've already mentioned. So now I want to wrap up this reading vlog for you all. So I'm just going to go through the books one last time so we can see what I've managed to accomplish within this 24-hour timer challenge. And unfortunately, it's not as much as I would have liked to have read, but I feel like with me annotating Bonded by Thorns, that really impacted how many pages I was able to read. And then I will also calculate the total amount of pages I've read for you at the very end. So the first book I started off with was Bonded by Thorns, which overall got a 3 out of 5 stars. It was an okay read, not an absolute new favourite. I am very excited to be diving into the sequels later on. It's just not one that I'm desperate to pick up straight away. So yeah, a 3 out of 5 stars, but this was the second book I finished, because the first book I finished, let me grab it, was End of Days by Susan E. This was another good book, but it was also just another 3-star read. It was a bit of a letdown for a finale, especially after I gave Angel Fall 5 out of 5 stars. I expected this to be a 5-star series, but it just wasn't, which really hurt my soul. So this was another 3 out of 5 stars. And then I picked up The Striker by Anna Huang, and this was also another 3 stars, which is frustrating because I went into this with so many expectations, because Anna Huang is an author who I love, but this book was just a letdown. It is probably one of my least favourite books I've read from her. I don't know if it's necessarily my least favourite, it's just not one I loved, but I am excited to be diving into the next book next year when it's released. Like, I'm not going to DNF this series at all. Like, I'm still going to continue reading Anna Huang, because romance authors are the type of authors where I'll read majority of their works if I've liked them before, just because different romance novels can be so hit or miss depending on the tropes that are present and the way that the characters are presented to you, and these just weren't characters who I love, so this was another 3 out of 5 stars. Then I finally had a 5 out of 5 stars with Road of Bones by Demi Winters. I loved this book so much. It's one of the best books I've read this whole year. I adore it to bits. I just highly recommend it if you're looking for a Viking inspired fantasy romance novel. It was just so good. The first 100 pages were slow, and even though some people say there's a love triangle in this book, which I normally hate, I felt like it was done in a way that I didn't really view it as a love triangle, because it had a very specific structure to it which really worked for me, and like, I wouldn't call it a love triangle. And I loved the main character, Scylla. I felt like she was brilliant, one of the best characters I've read from this year. She was so brave and strong. She didn't let people walk over her, which I really enjoyed. And then I also loved the characters of Jonas and, oh my god, why don't I remember his name? And Ray. I just loved all of the side characters. Just everything about this book to me was perfect, other than the first 100 pages, which I always talk about when I talk about Road of Bones, because I binge read this book in basically 1 to 2 sittings. I loved it so much, but I almost DNF'd it. Like, I literally cannot believe I almost DNF'd this book. And I'm so mad that I need to wait for the sequel to come out, because this book was originally indie published, I think, and then it got traditionally published, and this has only just been released in Australia, so then I need to wait for the sequel to come out, which is, I think, next year May, so I'm kind of desperate for that book. And I think this is also going to be a 5-book series, if I'm correct. I could be wrong, but I'm so excited to continue on with this series. Definitely has the potential to become an all-time new favourite series and book of mine. I just hope the rest of the series can hold up for me. And then I read Airy by S.C. Wendell. This was a 4 out of 5 stars. I'm definitely continuing on with the series. I'm not going to go into more of my thoughts about it because I've just spoken about it to you all. So yeah, 4 out of 5 stars. So now I'm going to quickly calculate how many pages I've read, and then I'll let you guys know. So I'll be back in 2 seconds. I've just finished calculating how many pages I've read over this 24-hour period, and in total I've read 2,258 books, which divided by 24 is 94 pages. So on average, every hour I read 94 pages, which is quite impressive considering I've only read 5 books, and then one of them books are annotated. So I'm quite happy with, on average, how much I read, how much I've read in this reading vlog, because I'm quite happy with the progress I've made towards Project TBR Zero with this challenge, because I managed to knock 4 books off my physical TBR, which is so exciting. However, I did have 1 book that's not on my physical TBR, which I do want to read the sequel for, which I'll need to buy, or I'll just read on Kindle Unlimited.